This is the video description of the job we called HaynesB Stena Atlantic, which was a case where we represented Stena, who was going to be the owner of this drilling rig in a contract they made with Samsung of Korea to build this rig, and it was a construction delay case, and Stena ultimately canceled the order, claiming that Samsung had caused too much delay in its construction. And then, of course, Samsung countersued, saying that those changes that Stena wanted were actually the cause of the delays. So that was the source of the dispute. We did a handful of graphics for this, and had some pretty cool animated stuff, and I don't think any of that ever got used. We ended up delivering a few stills that went into an expert report, and then I don't think we ever learned the outcome of this. Anyway, here's a run through the animations we produced. So first was the exploded view of this mobile offshore drilling rig, which looks a lot like the Deepwater Horizon, and it's the same type of rig. It's a floating double pontoon deepwater drilling rig. So it has a lot of the same parts, and it looks quite similar to the Deepwater Horizon. So we did this little exploded view to name the parts and then do a little zoom in so that we can introduce the areas where the dispute was about. A lot of the dispute was about changes that Stena wanted to do to the main deck, changing cranes and reinforcing certain parts, which Stena thought were minor changes and could be included in the scope of work, and then Samsung said no, these are major changes which cause significant delays. So there was we'll go through the changes here on the upper deck. There were six major changes there. There was some issue here with this double bottom portion of the hull, which is kind of like a crawl space. It's a place where there's utilities and piping and that sort of thing, and it turned out that Samsung kept adding piping and cabling down there and limited the access to workmen, and that was a big part of the dispute. And then the columns and braces of the pontoons, there was a change there, and they changed the entire size of the structure, which was a fairly significant change. Anyway, then we had a little bit different view so we could show where some of these parts, where the riser gantry crane plays a role, as does the pipe gantry crane back here. And then zoom back to the wide shot. The next group of illustrations we did were showing how the rig was broken up into its subassemblies, and these are the parts that were built individually and then assembled in the dry dock. So here we got the colored main deck sections, and each of the decks were divided into large blocks that are hoisted into place and then welded together to make the hull of the ship. So there's a huge amount of work to be done in designing and building this and pre-assembling it and then assembling in the dry dock. These are the pieces of the pontoons that are assembled on land and then welded together in the dry dock, along with the supporting columns and braces. Closer look at the deck portions. Everywhere there's a line, splits the blocks into separate assemblies that have to get built somewhere and then put into place. And these are huge things. They're the size of buildings, but they're all made out of steel because they're going to be part of a ship. And then close up of the superstructure of the rig, and a final close-up of the main upper deck assemblies where there's shops, living quarters, and that sort of thing. And then a exploded view of that. So there's 20 or so separate assemblies in here that just go in the red part. So it's a massive undertaking. One of the disputes was where the device, or where the rig should have been assembled. Stena believed that it should have been assembled in a floating dry dock where you had access to from all sides with a floating crane. And here's a little animation we did showing an assembly sequence for the pontoons, where a giant floating crane brings in the pontoon parts, drops them onto the dry dock, and then this whole dry dock can be rotated so that you can assemble the other side. It makes for a pretty easy work platform little less restrictive than the land-based dry dock. Stena's point here was that you were required to make fewer subassemblies to assemble it here in the floating dry dock when compared with what you had to do on land. And it ended up, Hyundai chose to do it on the land-based dry dock, which was, a source of contention because that caused some more work because they had to break up the structure into more subassemblies. Then the main meat of the story was these 6 change orders that had to do with items on the main deck of the rig. So we did a series of 2-frame comparisons, sort of the before and after. So change order number 4 here was for a deck extension. So without the deck extension, it looks like this. With the deck extension, you get some extra red wings on here. They give it a little bit more floor space. So that was one of the changes. The second one was the pipe handling crane. The green crane here got changed out for a gantry crane, which required some more support structure on the deck. Third change was the setback area load increase. There's an area where they stand drill pipe in here. It's just this green area. It didn't really change shape. It just required more reinforcing underneath to hold a greater load. They upped it to 1,200 tons from 800 tons or something like that. So visually there's not much difference, but there's quite a bit of reinforcing that goes on underneath that to accommodate the extra weight. The pipe deck capacity expansion, same thing. The pipe deck stays the pipe deck, but they had to increase its load carrying capacity underneath, so that involved more structural work to support the extra weight. And extension of the riser handling crane, which was just to take this overhead crane and extend the rails a few meters in order to give it a little bit more space. So looks like a fairly minor change. And similar extension on the pipe handling gantry crane. It was originally planned to be in the green, and then it had to be extended, which required some more support structure along with the other changes. This is sort of a follow-on change from the addition of the extra support structures when they changed from the knuckle boom crane to the gantry crane. And then the final little series of illustrations was a depiction of the size of the rig and discussion of what changes were made in the hull. The hull got bigger by a few, portions of a meter or meter. And on this scale, it's hard to see. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it required changing a lot of parts here. So here's the entire rig compared to a soccer pitch. Little close-up deal. It's monstrous. We found a nice photograph of a soccer pitch where we could superimpose the model and really give you a sense of how huge this thing is. And then a faded away, color-coded version that showed all the parts in red that had to get changed or made larger in order to accommodate those changes. So on that scale, this is like changing a building. It's gigantic. And that was the end of it. That's what we produced. I think the main products were these stills that went into expert reports. And after that, we don't know what happened. I think we finished this work toward the beginning of 2020 or at the end of 2019. Don't know the result.